The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. Today's guest is Pete Sulack, and he's here to talk to us about how he beat his terminal brain cancer. Let's welcome Dr. Pete.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. I think you are going to bring some very valuable information to all the listeners. I want to go back in time. You were healthy a year ago, right? And then what happens?
Yeah, so November 25th was the Monday of Thanksgiving, and I knew that probably for 18 months previous, I was having some symptoms.
Okay.
They'd gotten progressively worse, probably 2 weeks prior to November 25th. And my brother actually convinced me to go into the emergency room because it was the Monday of Thanksgiving. To be honest with you, I thought I might have had a mini stroke. I couldn't throw a baseball. I had two boys that play baseball, and I couldn't throw it straight. It would literally go sideways. I couldn't basically serve a pickleball into the court for the life of me. And my wife was starting to finish my sentences quite a bit more. And I would just kind of feel like I was getting brain fog. And so I actually told my staff that Monday morning that, hey, I'm going to take a step back. And my staff didn't have any clue what was going on. And I just said, it's an opportunity for you to take a step forward. And then I went to the emergency room that Monday. And after about 8 hours, they came in and said, Pete, you have a glioblastoma. You have a 1% chance to be alive in 8 months. It's the size of a tennis ball. And right here and yeah, that was a huge shock. But God's so gracious and he goes before us. And I remember walking out of there that day and felt like the Lord said, son, it's not unto death, but I'm going to open up a brand new harvest field for you of cancer patients. I want you to go inspire them, give them hope, and introduce them to the love of God. And I pray that I'm doing that effectively. And so that was 11 months ago. And I'm very, very grateful to just be alive.
I love that explanation because that's exactly what I'm doing with my show is just trying to bring hope to people in different ways and
Yeah.
whatever that need is. And so clearly this episode is to just bring hope to people that are struggling with their health and cancer. So you got the tumor. Did you get it removed?
Yep. So December 11th, I had a 8-hour surgery and they removed what's called a tennis ball sized tumor. They thought they got about 90%. They left what was affecting speech and motor control because honestly, they didn't know if I would come out of surgery and be able to walk or talk. And then I actually had the tumor sample sent to a Munising Cancer Center in Cancun, and they mixed it with my plasma and gave me 3 shots, which create dendritic cells that will go and scavenge my body for any remaining tumor growth or future tumor growth. And then I really went all in on lifestyle modification and just on nutrition and supplements. And I did lab work in functional labs to kind of personalize everything in regards to the supplements I was taking, my diet. I work with a nutritionist, and here I am today simply by the grace of God, feeling healthier than I've ever felt in my whole life.
Mm-hmm. And even though it was cancer and that's so extreme, this is obviously what your body needed as a huge wake-up call to make
Yeah.
changes, it sounds like. And I also have to say we're obviously not diagnosing anybody or giving medical advice, so always talk to your doctor. But I've been through very similar things where I was going to Stanford and they were just working me up test after test. They thought it was MS for a while. And then they sent me to UCSF where I did a bunch more testing. And I remember the doctor said, "Give me 3 weeks. I want to go through everything, all the results, all the things." And so she did. And when I went back, I remember it was like the first thing she said. She goes, "Andrea, have you heard of ALS?" And I remember thinking, "Yes, and that means I'm just going to die." And so then I just took it into my own hands and started doing all this research, and I found a doctor that was treating himself. He had ALS, and he was treating himself for Lyme disease and found that as one of the
Yeah.
correlations. And so I dove in with all this research and trying to figure out what my body needed because, like you're saying, your body, specifically, your body
Yeah.
had its own specific needs. And I think that is really, really key for anybody that's trying to overcome something is to find what we very specifically need within our own bodies.
Yeah. And people ask me all the time, like, what's the best diet for brain cancer or leukemia or breast cancer or prostate cancer? A personalized diet, one where you can look underneath the hood and customize everything. And for me, it wasn't even about treating cancer. It wasn't about replacing an oncologist or medical team. It was about establishing the train of my body in such a way that cancer was just no longer hospitable in my body. Because if cancer is able to grow in my head, in my brain, then how do I reverse engineer, so to speak, so that we can literally starve cancer's fuel pathways? And now, honestly, other than my salvation and my family, the greatest gift of my life was this diagnosis because it just, one, what the enemy used for harm was at the risk of establishing me further. And I honestly feel like God has punked the devil with my life. I'm just so, so grateful.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's amazing that you're still here and spreading this
Yeah.
message. I want to ask about brain cancer as far as treating brain cancer versus other cancers. Is it more difficult because of the blood-brain barrier? And people talk about polysorbate 80 and needing that to go like in vaccines per se, not that we're going to get into that
Yeah.
whole thing, but vaccines have polysorbate 80 so that it can pass the blood-brain barrier. So when it comes to diet, are there certain things that you consumed to help the nutrients pass through to the
Yeah.
blood-brain barrier better?
I think for me, it was, I was privileged enough to reach out to the night I was diagnosed to reach out to Dr. Josh Axe, who's a
Mm,
world leading health expert, and his wife and my wife are first cousins, which is very convenient. And then
okay.
Jordan Rubin is one of my best friends. And so I was able to kind of navigate this journey with them. And we came up with basically a strategy around 5 pillars of diet, supplementation, detoxification, oxygenation, and faith. And that's really how I approached it. Because of that, I kind of became my own patient and incorporated a program I'd created for my wife years ago that really customized everything. I ran functional labs on myself. I created a supplement personalized and compounded for me. I created a meal plan based on my blood work. And so that's really what I did. And so it's how do we open up detoxification pathways? How do we establish the gut? How do we restore fluidity of the cell membrane, clear out the mitochondria? What are some of the foods based on DNA and nutrient deficiencies and food sensitivities so that we can basically starve those cancer fuel pathways, add the sufficiency that the body needs, and really put our body in a position to heal? I think even when it comes to gut health, what most people don't realize is that the gut is hyperpermeable or leaky. Just even good nutrients will cross into the bloodstream. And then if they circulate long enough, they'll cross the blood-brain barrier. And even when you look at Alzheimer's, dementia, brain tumors, it's really a brain toxicity. And so for me, it's, well, on earth did I get brain cancer? Was it the fact that I'd been around the world 25 times with our ministry? Could it be parasites? Could it be ionizing radiation from cell phones? Could it be stress, a lack of margins, or just an assignment that the enemy tried to take me out before my time? I think it's a combination of all of those things. And so it allowed me to really look underneath the hood and do the due diligence to really hopefully now empower people to allow them to know that cancer does not have to be a death sentence for their life.
Mhm. When you're saying all this, I'm thinking about the root cause. Did you figure out what the root cause was, or did you just kind of figure out what your body really needed to be supported at optimal level?
Yeah. Because, if you look at research now with parasites and cancer, there's a ton of research out there, a lot of off-script medications. People like Dr. William Mackis, Joe Tippins are kind of bringing a lot of that to light. Is it just a lack of margins and stress? Cortisol can actually cause essential activities in the body to increase, non-essential activities to decrease in the body, and it can create a cytokine storm and just
Mhm.
create havoc and chaos in the body. Was it just an assignment of the enemy? Like I said, it could be a combination of all of those things. But for me, it was just, okay, let's put one foot in front of the other. Let's establish the training of the body. Let's open up, establish the gut, do things to improve brain function, and let's go after this thing and just fight. And because my life was on the line, no one gave me a chance. And now I'm just so grateful that I was willing, one, just to understand what I'd created for my wife initially and what I'd seen work on my patients. And then to be able to honestly become my own patient was a huge blessing.
Mhm. So you had the tumor removed and they left 10% because you said
Mhm.
about 90%
Yeah.
was okay. So about 10% was left behind, is what you were saying.
Yeah.
Oh, so 10% gets left behind. And then at that point, when was the scan where you found out everything was clear and gone?
At the 4-month mark, I had MRI, brain MRI, and the neurosurgeon and oncologist looked at it and said they couldn't believe it, but there was no sign of even the remaining 10%. And they said from their perspective, I had a normal brain. And I just had an MRI. So it's been a little over 11 months since I was diagnosed. I just had an MRI a little over a month ago, and they said that was clear as well. And then I had a CT scan probably 2 weeks ago with blood work, and they said that was clear. So I'm very, very grateful.
Well, that's really amazing. Can you share some of the things that you used to support your detox pathways or some of the supplements that you used?
Absolutely. So I think for me, detoxification is very, very important. So things like coffee enemas. I used to make fun of my wife for doing coffee enemas, and now I have no problem doing coffee enemas just because when your life is on the line, you're willing to do whatever. And so coffee enemas were a great way to detoxify the liver and the kidneys. Also, things like castor oil and castor oil packs, just hydrating yourself, hydrogen water, open up detoxification pathways. When it comes to oxygenation, I've done everything from PMF to high dose vitamin C to hydrogen water, other things that I've incorporated, ozone saunas and ozone therapy. I love jumping on a mini trampoline. In fact, I believe a mini trampoline is one of the greatest exercises that you can do. In fact, 10 minutes on a mini trampoline is proven as effective, if not more, than 10,000 steps each day. And we know the kind of the rule of thumb with 10,000 steps, how that's so beneficial. And there's just a lot of things that I do: Epsom salt baths, essential oils, compounded supplements, and so forth. Yeah.
When you say the mini trampoline, you're referring to just getting that lymphatic system moving, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one of the greatest ways to improve circulation, improve that lymphatic drainage. It's just so beneficial. And so just 10 minutes, anyone can do it. 10 minutes, you don't even have to jump high. You can actually just move on that trampoline. And it's just such a good way of improving circulation and making sure that the body doesn't remain stagnant.
So I have a question about the mini trampolines because I actually see in a lot of my mom groups people asking about the rebounders, basically
Mhm.
essentially what we're referring to when we say mini trampoline. And they're asking which one should I get? And there's such a wide
Yeah.
range of you could spend $60 or you could spend hundreds and hundreds and
Yeah.
hundreds. Do you think it matters?
No, I don't. Honestly,
Okay.
I think an Amazon one for $99, typically a good one on Amazon is probably 140 to 150 bucks. They have sales all the time for $99. I have companies reaching out to me now because of social media promoting rebounding and mini trampolines that are trying to offer me 800, 900, $1,000 mini trampolines and rebounders. So I think that would be ideal. That would be great. But for me and for most people, it's cancer becomes very, very expensive. But I think even if you don't have cancer, a rebounder is just a great way to improve circulation and enhance lymphatic drainage and so forth.
Mhm. So when we talk about this, everybody is at risk. Everybody's at risk for cancer. What would you say is a starting point for people that want to prevent it? They know they're healthy now, but they want to be healthy for the long haul.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. 1 out of every 2 men and 1 out of every 3 women in this generation will be diagnosed with cancer, which is crazy. And that's very, very alarming. And everyone, I have 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds reaching out to me right now, and their families are saying their 2-year-old has cancer, their 4-year-old, their 8-year-old has cancer, and they're just not knowing where it comes from. And so I think it's a matter of just personalizing your diet and cutting out sugar and sodas and hydrating yourself and get moving and exercise, simple things, grounding, getting vitamin D out in the sun. And when you can't get vitamin D from the sun, I think things like a UVB lamp, and there's just so many other ways right now that we can just stimulate vitamin D production, vitamin C, just miracle nutrients, and just being very and paying attention to your health and knowing that your health is a gift from God. And if we steward that gift, we can partake in the fruits of that gift. And when we steward, it means we honor that gift. And so often we take for granted that our health is one of the greatest gifts in our lives. We understand our relationships and finances are gifts, and we need to steward them. Otherwise, we're going to lose them. But when it comes to people's health, somehow we've got away with thinking that we can just react to it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Yet people feel good and die of heart attacks, feel good and have cancer all the time.
Mhm. Do you think number one would be food and diet, focusing on that? Because we have the outside factors that come in, like the EMF or your water. A lot of people don't have, I mean, even in America, right? We don't
Yeah.
have good water.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of outside sources. There's a lot of toxic chemicals people use in their homes and all these things. What is your take on if somebody has a really good diet and they're following a great diet? Do you think all those other things matter as far as cutting them out? Or do you think we are supporting our bodies in a way that it allows us to deal with those things that come our way? Or what is your take on that?
I think when it comes to cancer specifically, cancer really needs a fuel source. So glucose is the primary fuel source, or sugar. It needs inflammation, and then it needs a lack of oxygen. And so, one, I can have the cleanest diet on the planet, but if I'm incorporating healthy foods that I have a sensitivity to, it's going to create an inflammatory storm. So that's why I think just a simple rule of thumb is a food sensitivity test.
Yeah.
See what your body's sensitive to, see what you can incorporate. That was my wife. So my wife came to me probably 5 years before I was diagnosed. And my wife had the cleanest diet of anyone I knew. She was gluten-free, dairy-free, eating organic, taking supplements, working out, mid-40s, but she was exhausted, hormonal imbalances and digestive issues. And at the time, I reached out to a number of functional medicine practitioners and found that most of them did not do functional blood work, and those that did give everyone the same supplements, which were great, but there's no personalization. And my wife just said, hey, no offense, but I'm tired of living this way. I'm tired of just struggling and just throwing supplements at myself. Obviously, something's not working. And that's why I decided to do a deep dive into, okay, well, then what are the tests I want to run on my wife? Because what takes place at a cellular level is completely different than what's taking place in the blood. And I wanted to know what's taking place at a cellular level metabolically, because cancer and chronic illness is really metabolic. It's based on your metabolism. And so I determined, like, hey, let's run a food sensitivity test. Let's run a DNA test to determine if there's any DNA mutations. Let's run a micronutrient analysis. What most people don't realize is if the body is nutrient deficient at a cellular level, it's not going to clearly detoxify itself. In fact, it will spin its wheel when it comes to detoxification. I don't care if it's your liver, your kidneys, your digestive system, lungs, your skin, those will not work effectively as they should. But then when it comes to parasites, heavy metals, mold, or Lyme, they won't clear themselves effectively. And so I did a gut test as well, because if a person's gut is leaky, it's going to affect chaos in the rest of the body. And then I did a measure of inflammation called a homocysteine test. I took all that information, and to be quite honest with you, I actually called my manufacturer, my supplement company. I said, hey, can you do me a huge favor? Can you take my wife's blood work, put it down your assembly line, and fill it with what she's deficient in? And they laughed at me. They said, Dr. B, that doesn't work. They said, there's no money in compounded supplements. And unfortunately, they were right. But I did, thankfully, at the time, find a manufacturer in Canada that's willing to work with me. And we actually did that. We compounded a tailor-made supplement for my wife and created a meal plan for her. And the rest is history, so to speak. It transformed her life. And thankfully, knowing that result and knowing the results of my patients, I was able to become my own patient years later when I was diagnosed, and really, was fighting for my life. And food is medicine. Even though most Doctors will tell you food doesn't matter, but you have to understand the context by why they're saying that. Doctors get in trouble if they don't play ignorant when it comes to lifestyle modification. As long as you're kept within standard of care, they're covered under the malpractice. But if they even hint at lifestyle modification and you go away from standard of care, they can lose their license. And that's why the system is pretty messed up, to say the least. And so it's okay. How do we, establish the train of the body? Even a PET scan, which a doctor will give you a PET scan, which will blow you up with radiographic glucose and light you up like a Christmas tree. Yet at the same sentence, they'll say diet doesn't matter. Diet means everything. And if you want to win, you have to go all in when it comes to diet.
I mean, it makes so much sense, though, if you think about the cells in your body, how good could they be if all you eat is candy, right? I always
Yeah.
think about that, whatever you're putting in, that is what they are made of.
Yeah.
And so it makes a ton of sense. So you hit the nail on the head, though, with personalization. I think that is absolutely key. And that was part of my own journey with finding out I had Lyme. I also had mold and I had the parasites and all the things. But I had to find what was right and what
Yeah.
worked for me. And I always tell people what worked for me may not work for you, but continue to reach out and find people that have similar symptoms and figure out what worked for them. And part of, for me too, was my wisdom teeth cavitations.
Yeah.
Never would have thought of that, but I had been talking with a girl and that was something she said. She went to the Paracelsus clinic and she said, that's the first thing they look at is your mouth. And she was the first person and probably one of the only people that ever really mentioned that. Of course, when I went to the doctor, they're like, oh, yes, this is a thing. Go ahead, look into it. And I did. And then I was full of infection in my
Yeah.
wisdom teeth cavitation. So that was the whole thing. But
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you about the food sensitivity testing because I feel like I see a lot of different ones and they're advertised on social media all over the place. Do this one. It's, it's some are
Yeah.
blood, some are hair, different, some are saliva. Do you think they're all the same? They all work just as well? Or is there one you specifically recommend?
I personally use what's called an LCAT test, and I do the most comprehensive just because I think that for me, I should say, when it came to my life being on the line, I wanted to remove just all the noise and get underneath the hood and figure out exactly what was going on in my body personally.
Mhm.
And I felt like I couldn't afford to guess or wait. And so there's a lot of food sensitivity tests out there. Some of them are crap, to be honest with you. Some of them are very good. I think any food sensitivity test, and I have a lot of people that reach out to me and say, Dr. B, that's crazy, like that's always going to give a false positive and so forth. And maybe so. But I think, removing sugar, removing inflammatory foods, healing your gut, balancing hormones, all those things are going to pay huge dividends. Like you said, cutting out sugar. But at the same time, do we want to enjoy life? We want our kids to enjoy life? Sure. And God's grace is sufficient, even in the midst of our weakness. But at the same time, hey, when your life is on the line, you have to go all in. And when I began to study the people that actually overcame cancer, you realize that they all go all in. And now, to be honest with you, I have a number of relatives who were diagnosed, and my wife specifically, who were diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, did the conventional approach, but went all in on their diets, the lifestyle and modification in diet. And now one's cancer-free 5 years and one's cancer-free 7 years. Yet I know individuals who the doctor said, that's stage 1, eat whatever you want. That's not a factor. Diet means nothing. And they're dead today because while they were set up to chemo and radiation, they were eating milkshakes, Diet Cokes, pizza, and which is just very, very sad because my heart breaks for the individuals that are basically not given the information and not educated, and they're just actually following what their doctor says, and their doctor's not giving them any hope, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's wild to think. Well, I don't know. I'd have to ask my mom because she got cancer and she went through it, but I don't think the doctors ever told her to change her diet, ever. I really think that is not something that doctors recommend. And it's wild. When you think about it, the cancer cells have to be fed by something. And like you were saying, it's also good to starve them and do all those things. But yeah, what is happening? And we know that sugar feeds
Yeah.
cancer cells. I mean, that's a fact. Everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people do know this. And I love that you're saying you also have to live life because so for me, I started to
struggle again. I have ulcerative colitis as well. I have lots of things. I was in complete remission for 10 years, no drugs, was doing fabulous, and then went through this very like emotional thing, and then it triggered it again. But then things started to get out of control again, and then I ended up doing the Dr. Gundry diet, the no
Yeah.
lectin diet, right? And it was insane. I mean, within a week, I was like, where's the blood? Like everything just resolved rapidly. But then I saw if I tried to slip things back in, I was like, ooh, but I'm doing much better and I feel like I can eat a little bit more. I still do like his recommendation of pressure cooking lectins.
Yep.
So if I want a pasta sauce, like a red sauce, then I mean, I still make it from scratch and I do like the peeled tomatoes and all that, but I do the pressure cooker to lower the lectin count because I can tell you, I absolutely saw a huge difference within a week for myself. And
Yeah.
I mean, and you're sharing your own story too of how rapidly, I mean, it's been less than a year. You were telling me that now you're cancer free, and that's absolutely wild, right?
Yeah.
When they said it was terminal.
It's interesting though, you said that about emotionally. There's such a huge correlation, for instance, with cancer, and 90% of cancers now are proven to have a correlation with an emotional trauma somewhere in their past. In fact, in breast cancer, if, I saw one study that says if breast cancer shows up in a woman's right breast tissue, it's typically because of an emotional trauma with a father figure somewhere in the past. But if it shows up in the left breast tissue, it's typically because of emotional trauma with a child, and just how it triggers physiology. When the body goes into a stress response and gets stuck in what's called allostatic load, is simply a place stuck away from homeostasis and balance, it's going to activate just essential activities, heart rate, blood pressure, stroke volume, blood sugar, and non-essential activities will actually downregulate like digestion, immune function, reproduction, growth hormone. And I want my body to adapt physiologically to the demands and stressors of life, but I need them to recover effectively. And when the body doesn't recover, it goes into chaos and fight or flight response. And it creates a lot of disruption at a cellular level in the body. And so emotional stress too. That's why in our protocol, in the people that we serve, we set them up with a certified trauma coach to make sure that they don't have any emotional traumatic memory stuck in the amygdala of your brain, which
Yes.
actually trigger that stress response. So we actually remove them, put those back in the cortex so the brain can heal. And just we kind of look underneath the hood and at all the different variables and factors to really just help empower people and educate people so they can get moving in the right direction.
Mhm. Well, and I can share with people that I went through the brain rewire certification
Yep.
process. And when I did that, I had to go away for a weekend and do like in-person stuff.
Yep.
And I had to do my own rewiring. And I remember that day going through the process and journaling out all these things and feeling super sick. And the teacher was like, keep going. I was like, I don't think I can. I'm going to throw up. He's like, nope, keep going, keep going. And so I kept going. Okay. Kept going. I mean, we didn't even get to eat. It was insane. It was like, you don't need food. You need to focus. And it was like, you just keep going. It was crazy. And I was like, I just want to go to Whole Foods. Please, I'm hungry. But kept going. And I went to bed that night. I remember doing a little more journaling. And then I woke up the next morning, like violently ill.
Mhm.
I could not stop going to the bathroom. It was awful. And it passed within probably an hour, hour and a half or something. And then I made it back to the class and I was telling the teacher about it. And he was like, it's the purge.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely saw, I mean, nothing else was wrong with me for the rest of the day. I was back to normal after that. So it was very interesting to watch that. But I definitely have seen, even with other people and doing the brain rewire, where you help them rewire events that have happened in their lives. And then the very next day, their bowels are completely different, or just they walk and feel a little bit lighter. Yeah. So emotional trauma is definitely something that has to be addressed. I mean, there's a lot that has to be addressed when you have
Yeah.
cancer. Clearly, you've had a lot
Yeah.
going. Do you know what traumas you've had in your body that were maybe?
I've asked myself the question too, and God's been very gracious. I don't really hold on to things. Are there things in the past? Yeah, I'm sure there are. And I've looked those, I've looked at, gone through this, these sessions on my own. What's interesting though is just perspective. And so in the midst of my diagnosis, my father-in-law died in a tragic car accident.
Oh,
And
boy.
you know, And to see my wife having to go through her husband being diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer and then her losing her father. But we know where he's at. We know that this life we're only passing through. We're not living for this life. And we're so grateful for the years we had with my father-in-law. And he was such a blessing for us when I was in the midst of it. He came, they drove through the night from Minnesota to come visit us in Knoxville on Thanksgiving right after I was diagnosed. They came to Houston for a surgery, and they were just so, so gracious. And we're so grateful for that time that we had with him. But we know that we'll see him again someday.
Mhm. Yeah. So, what did you say for people wanting to change their diet and just be kind of on a preventative path?
Yeah, I just think anything we can do to just steward well our diet, exercise, getting out in the sun, and just there's so many things that we can do that everyone really talks about. Like, hey, how are you going to just transform your health? And we're a big advocate for that. Is just hey, let's just put one foot in front of the others. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, I was on the phone with someone recently that says, Dr. Pete, like, is there grace? Like, what if I mess up? If you mess up, you mess up. Like, it's so okay. Just wake up, dust your feet off and let's go after it again. And so I think waking up every day and knowing that our life is important to the living God, that every day is a gift, and let's just go approach it and just with freedom and just joy. And that's kind of how we've approached life. Like every day is a gift. I feel like I'm living on borrowed time and I'm asking the Lord for another 50 years of borrowed time. But regardless, I just pray that my life inspires and encourages people and gives people hope.
But when it comes to food and diet, like what do you recommend for people? Do you recommend like gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free? I mean, obviously sugar-free, low
Yeah.
sugar, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Actually,
I
okay, question on the
yeah.
sugar. Let's start with the sugar. Do you think people need to be sugar-free, or do you think they need to be like, I don't know, 20 grams or less a day sort of thing?
My suggestion would be no added sugar.
Mhm.
And so I think there's enough foods out there that taste great. I would use more of a natural sweetener, maybe monk fruit or stevia
Right.
in honey. Yeah. I think even if you go into more of a brown sugar, a cane sugar, or coconut sugar, I think those would be better alternatives. Obviously, I like gluten free, but gluten free doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy. Gluten free just means that you don't have the gliadin molecule in it, but it's still a carb. It still breaks down to sugar. And so a lot of people have gone gluten free and think they're automatically healthy, but in reality, they're still eating tons and tons of carbs that break down to sugar. I think a whole food, a whole plant diet. I think for me, I lean more towards the vegetables rather than the fruits, just because fruit breaks down to sugar so rapidly. When it comes to fruit, I stick to the berries, the raspberries, the blueberries, the blackberries, and so forth. I think there's some fruits that are on the high glycemic index, and so they just break down so much faster into sugar. I think avoiding white rice, white potatoes, white sugar, I think is a great way to start. Not adding, making sure that when you're reading the labels, there's no added sugar. Like fruit doesn't have any added sugar. There's things that don't have any added sugar. And also, like we've talked about, giving yourself grace and just putting one foot in front of the others and just surrounding yourself with people that are going in the same direction that you're going, so you don't feel like you're going upstream all the time.
Yeah. I have to ask another question on food that is really interesting to me. I don't know if you've even heard about this. I'm thinking maybe you have. So, my daughter, when she had to, we're basically a gluten-free household. I do it by choice. I
Yeah.
wasn't diagnosed with celiacs or anything, but obviously, with an array of health problems, I feel like it's good for the inflammatory process that can happen. So, my daughter, though, we did food sensitivity testing, and that was something that came back was gluten. And the nurse practitioner was saying that we had to eliminate dairy regardless, even though I think she had some dairy insensitivities. And okay, I have to go off for a second on dairy because I can tell you every single time I see somebody with the most beautiful skin, they're usually older, so they're usually like in their 60s. And I always ask, what is your diet? Because they always have this just wrinkle-free, so smooth, so beautiful. They're always dairy-free. So I have to say that real quick. But anyway, the nurse practitioner was saying that the body actually, what they're finding, this is supposedly more recent studies, that the body sees dairy the same exact way that it sees gluten. So even if you don't have a dairy sensitivity, if you have a gluten sensitivity,
Mhm.
your body is still having basically an inflammatory response to the dairy. Have you
Yeah,
heard that?
there's a great book called Devils in the Milk where it talks about how there's a beta glucan A1 protein, which is in typical cow's milk, and then there's a beta glucan A2 milk, which is in heirloom cattle and so forth. And though it actually shows the research that proves that the A1 protein is more detrimental on the body and on the brain than gluten is, but A2 protein, which we typically get from breast milk, goat's milk, sheep's milk, and heirloom cattle, is actually not detrimental, but actually very, very beneficial. So I have a lot of individuals that I know that actually are huge proponents of A2 dairy. Now you see in the grocery stores A2 dairy. I would say an organic A2 dairy would be very beneficial. I think A1 dairy. If you're not able to find A2 dairy, then organic coconut milk with unsweetened and organic almond milk unsweetened. I think stay away from soy milk. I think oat milk is actually breaks down to sugar so quickly. And if you're doing any of that, I would make sure it's organic, whole food. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of research now coming out on the proteins in dairy and being just not even as detrimental as gluten, but even more detrimental than gluten.
But have you heard about the body seeing it essentially the same?
Yeah, but I think, it all comes down to sensitivity. It comes down to candida. It comes down to casein allergy and so forth. I think anything in moderation, in my opinion, is okay. Even, a little bad every once in a while is called the hormesis theory. It's beneficial for the body. It kind of shocks that body. But obviously we want to do everything in moderation. Personally, I try to stay away from dairy. I try to stay away from sugar, gluten. I'm actually staying away from most carbs except for complex carbs. I don't even right now just because my diet's so specific. I found, for instance, that I was sensitive to chicken and beef, but I'm great with bison and salmon. Yet allulose, which is in a lot of keto-friendly snacks, I had a sensitivity to allulose, but I was great with monk fruit and stevia. So it's just kind of looking underneath the hood. And for me, especially for those dealing with cancer, I think personalization is best.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more because, yeah, like I said, I've been through a similar
Yeah.
journey and I've seen that. The gluten-free thing, it's a little bit complicated because
Yeah.
sometimes people think, "Oh, I'll just buy gluten-free and it's
Yeah.
all good." And like you were saying, buy organic. I know we could talk about it for a second, but almonds are supposed to be pretty bad if they're not organic.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, people think, "Oh, it's almond milk or it's made with almonds. It's good." But there's just so many chemicals then. And
Based on the gums and fillers and everything else. And so, yeah, I think, if you can stay towards the outside of the grocery store, I think that's best rather than staying in the middle of the grocery store. I think that's where you get yourself in trouble.
yeah, absolutely. Well, you've shared a lot of valuable information. I know you have a course that you offer to help people with cancer, right?
Yeah, so we have a Be Resilient course, which is an 8-month, very comprehensive course that we walk people and just kind of help people navigate this journey. We set you up with a nutritionist, a certified trauma coach. But I think the easiest thing is just if your viewers are interested, follow me on social media at Dr. Pete Sulack. I right on Thanksgiving, 3 days after I was diagnosed, I asked my wife, I said, "Hey, do you think we could invite people into this journey with us?" And it was very apprehensive for my wife because the doctor just said, "You probably wouldn't be alive in 8 months." But I just said, "If we're going to go out, let's go out swinging and let's go out and inspire as many people as we can." And so we invite people into our journey. We have videos constantly on different tips around terrain-based theory against cancer. And then anyone that follows me on Instagram can type protocol in any one of the comments on any one of the videos, and we'll send you an 87-page free download called the Resilience Protocol. It's the books that are inspiration to me, the supplements I recommend. We have scriptures and promises from the Word of God just to help people on their journey. It's free. You just follow your messages after typing protocol in the comments.
I want to ask about your program. So your program, you said you go through the trauma coaching. Do you also do the nutrition coaching,
Yeah.
do you do the food sensitivity testing
Yeah.
and all that?
So
Okay.
so we run the comprehensive functional blood work. We actually send a phlebotomist to the house to draw your blood. We send that blood work off, and in about 3 weeks, those labs will post, and we'll assign a nutritionist that will work with you for the entire 8 to 9 months. We also set you up with a certified trauma coach. It comes with all the compounded tailor-made supplements, the meal plans based on your blood work, online community. And we just do everything we can to walk with the people that God entrusts us to. Just allow people hopefully to know that cancer does not have to be a death sentence.
Mm-mm. Well, I love that because you're clearly catering to people's individual
Yeah.
needs and not just, okay, here's my protocol. Here, try it
Yeah.
out. You're doing lab work and you're providing exactly what that person's body needs. So I think that's really amazing. I really appreciate you being here because I think so many people they need the hope,
Yeah.
especially when they're not well. When we're not well, we struggle the most. And if we're not surrounded by people to help uplift us, we need to find that hope somewhere else. And sometimes it may just be by listening to a
Yeah.
podcast or following somebody on Instagram and that sort of thing. So thank you so much for bringing the hope to everybody that they can be cancer free.
Honestly, it was an honor to connect with you today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.